Thank you all so much. This has been an incredible program, and it's awesome to see a packed house still into the afternoon. We've got an incredible panel up ahead. Two of the biggest boss ladies when it comes to talent management and sports, talking today a little bit more about building portfolio businesses for women athletes. We have Fara Leff, the Chief Operating Officer at Clutch Sports Group and a partner at UTA, the United Talent Agency. Let's give her a hand. And to my right, we have Constance Schwartz-Morini, the co-founder and CEO of Smack Entertainment. Constance, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having us.
So when we talk about the next era of women in sport, oftentimes we're talking about the actual athletics. But we don't want to miss out on what we're here for, which is the business of women's sport and how athletes can transform their brands into something more, whether it's a media business or a commerce business. Constance, you and I were talking about this the other day. Your belief is no matter what, like being an athlete is still core, right? You have to do that first to build the foundation for everything else. When you have an athlete approach you about wanting to build something, and they're committed to that core, what's the next step?
As long as they're aligned that we say, and this is a Coach Prime saying, is keep the main thing, which I'm sure you have the same struggles, is as long as they know that that comes first, then we can start figuring it out. And we almost do a medical intake form, which I'm sure is similar to what you guys do, is we ask them the questions of, what is it, like, what are you interested in? What brands do you currently work with? What brands will you not work with? You know, just to really get to know them, because it's usually somebody new that you don't know. And it sounds so basic, but it's so important because we don't want to waste their time and we don't want to waste our time and just spinning our wheels saying, like, you know, these are the things. So DK Metcalf from the Seattle Seahawks just, you know, came into the family. He's big into fashion. So, like, for us, like, he's giving us some good direction to say, like, let's start pursuing these angles. And also just making sure that, unfortunately, we all know the good and the bad of social media, but just making sure that they are maximizing, you know, I don't want to say the clicks because it's not just about how many followers you have, but that the authenticity is there, and then also that there's great follow-through and follow-up.
A follow-up question for you, though, is every athlete programmed to build a business? Have you ever had people come to you and they're just not willing to maybe put in that work to do the social support? What does it take to become a business builder from just an athlete?
I mean, I'm sure I'll get some flack for this, but not everybody's a brand. Like, not everybody's going to be able to take what they've accomplished on court or on field and turn it into the next big media company or commerce brand. Like, a lot of people say they want to do it, but can they actually do it? And that's something that we really take pride in having those conversations with the potential client to say, we can't work harder than you. We will, but we can't want it more than you do. And that's something that you'll see really out of the gate. And you also know, like, if an athlete's hurt, I want to know what they're doing. If they're out there promoting their businesses and their brands and not promoting their recovery, like that, those are key indicators for us because, again, you got to keep the main thing, and use that success you've had to go ahead and launch from there. But we're very honest. Like, the joke with us at Smack is if you don't want to hear the truth, don't work with us.
That is a hard truth and a hard pill to swallow, but it's helpful to be transparent up front, right? You're probably saving people time. Fara, what are the green shoots, the opportunities that coming off the court, women athletes could be looking into that you find work? Is it commerce? Is it building media businesses? Is it hosting broadcast shows? What's working right now?
I think it's a lot of pressure to tell an athlete you have to build a business, and that's not what they have to lay their life on. And I think if all of us as executives were told, your career, you probably retire in 8 to 10 years if you're great. What do you want to do in those 8 to 10 years? Building a business might not be the first thing because you're like, I want to be the best basketball player. So I really think, especially right now, women are getting an opportunity to showcase their talent on the highest level, and everyone's watching. And I'll know as fans, we all need to purchase tickets and continue watching and not just talk about it and talk about their salaries and talk about the things they're doing. Like, go and support them and watch the games and buy the tickets. But I think that the best thing, and Constance does it, one of the best with her clients, is the marketing, the building is telling their story enough so we all care to know what they're going to do later. So that time period is not just about what media company can I start or I feel like everyone's starting a production company, but what are you producing and what are you doing and why are you doing it? What's the purpose? Not just, I'm really good at this, maybe I should start a makeup line or maybe I should start something, but taking that opportunity to build your story and make people care so that you can start something. And maybe it's 5 years later, or it doesn't have to all be the minute your name's in the media.
What's funny, what you said, is I think we talked about this, is in the 90s and early 2000s, every athlete wanted a record label. They all had record labels. And now it's like every athlete wants a production company because I think LeBron and Michael, who were the first, like LeBron was the one still playing and Michael the first that retired, they make it look easy, but nobody realizes the amount of work that goes into these production companies. And similar to LeBron, stray hands on pitches. He's looking at cuts of all the shows that we have going out, and it doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't just happen because of the name. So I'm watching this very closely on everyone's little pop-up production companies.
Just to go back to something you said, Farah, how do you even start to build your own narrative? Like, where do you go to spread it? Is it coming to conferences like this? Do you hire somebody to help create your story arc? I mean, if you're an athlete, that's not something you're thinking about, even if you have a good story to tell.
I think in the opportunity of the businesses brands and what I truly think is a real partnership is when a company comes and wants to partner. We represent Juju Watkins. For her partners, it's what are you telling of her too? Why is she partnering with you? Not necessarily that she needs a brand or an endorsement or dollars to be in a headline, but what is the partnership and what can we tell the world while using this partnership about her? Is it about where she's from? Is it about her family? What can we use both for? And that to me is the true partnership and how you begin to tell the narrative. And then it's the social media. I always tell our athletes, like, don't share what we think you're doing and know you're doing. Don't share that you have a Goyard bag and you're on a private plane. Share the things that make us feel similar to you, your dinners with your family. Because at most points, these athletes are very similar to everyone. They're waking up at the same times, they're working hard. But, I think social media has become to show like the show off part of you instead of the relatability. And I think the narrative of sharing those stories. So now you're a fan of someone because they have an older brother like you, or they eat the same cereal for breakfast, and all those things begin to tell a story, and the ones that do it best and share the most that are relatable, I think, begin those narratives, and those are the people who create the successful businesses.
We saw during the NCAA finals that the women were so much more popular on Instagram and on social than the men. Do you see that across the board, too, when you're working with athletes? Do females tend to have a stronger sense of building their narratives on social than the men?
I will say this year was such a special year because everyone was asking me if I was going to the Final Four, and I was like, oh, I'm not going to make it to Phoenix. They're like, no, we meant Cleveland. Like, it was the first time where, like, the word Final Four specifically kind of reached the women more, and I think more females were being named than men in the Final Four, which was an epic year. I do think, and same reason I think we're great at our jobs, is there's a part of women that care more about little details and little things, so I think women are more apt to share those things and talk about those things and have those girly conversations and share that, and it makes them a little more likable, where the men tend to think they have to be this figure of strength and not show their weaknesses as much. So I think the relatability tends to lean on women there more.
Constance, in terms of how that shows up in the business space, how do the male athletes you work with versus female athletes you work with respond to new projects in things like documentaries or podcasts? Is there a difference that you found in how they approach these things?
I have not seen a difference yet, but, for example, we represent Deanna Flores, who's the flag football champion who was featured in a Super Bowl campaign last year. And her popularity from the moment she came into the Smack family has just, it's been a shooting star. And that's what I was talking about. Like, just because you have, 100 million followers on social media, it doesn't mean it translates to connecting with your audience. So that's what I will say is what I've seen that's different is her connectivity. And again, it has to do with authenticity. I want to shout out Mooch, who's here from my team, who's Deanna's day-to-day. And every week I'm seeing another offer come in for her, but they're projects or brands that she would work with even if she wasn't getting paid. And that translates, it's similar to you guys, all of our clients. We always say to them, if you're only doing this to get a check, don't do it, because the consumers are so smart. It's kind of like, I think the way influencers that are getting paid to use products have kind of lost some credibility. It's the same thing with talent.
How does NIL play into all of this? Because now you have athletes that are young that are tapping in, right? They're not waiting till like later on in their careers.
There's two sides to this, and you're probably feeling it too. Because we were laughing, like, we love that we represent families. So, Farah has LeBron and the boys, and I have Coach Prime and his boys. So there's NIL, which I'm 1,000% for, because I think these young college athletes should have the right to manage and profit off of their name, image, and likeness. It's the collectives that are the biggest struggle. So I just always want to define what we're talking about. So when I talk about NIL, I think it's fantastic. I love it. It's the collectives that's a struggle, because how can an 18 or 19-year-old kid come in to command 7 figures when they're coming out of high school, and how do you have those leadership skills to be a leader, on a team? And I think it'll be a rude awakening when they get to the pros on where the big man on campus now, and how is that going to translate when you get to the professional side? I don't know if you've had similar experiences.
I agree. I think NIL for us as the agents on this is it's so hard to sit in a family's house with a high schooler and try to predict that they're going to, as an NBA, have 1 year in college, NFL 3, WNBA 4 years, and predict that they're going to hold their name and likeness to this level that everyone is around them is telling them. So I really think that the goal of the agencies is not to sell the name and likeness, but to protect it and to actually learn, like, what is the value that you put in your name, image, and likeness, because everyone around them and the schools is just telling them sell it, sell it, sell it. But if you're continuingly to sell it, by the time, if you really think you're going to be this top person and it's sold already, your value's not where everyone's telling you, because the money when you're a senior in high school or a freshman in college is there now. And I think the sad part of all of it is that these kids are just getting so overwhelmed with these opportunities, and they think they need to take everything.
So let's talk about what's safe to take and maybe what's not. If you're being inundated with every opportunity across the book, a brand deal here, a commercial deal here, a paid speaking engagement here, what are the things that college athletes, in the space of female college athletes, should consider things that are easy enough to experiment with without maybe overwhelming themselves?
I mean, the baseline NIL deal is memorabilia, and I think it's smart because it's protecting your image, and hopefully you get it that it has a rate that changes with as you grow and as you get better in your career. And then I think that you really, at the top level of these women, take the opportunities that you get to share something with, something authentic. I say that if you're lactose intolerant, don't do a milk ad. Like, really stay with those authentic brands, and then if it fits who you are, you'll get more. One thing, if you're going to take the check, make sure it's a really big check. If it's something that you're not 100% on.
Spoken like a woman negotiator. I love that.
But I think these women are at this point where brands are looking at them and waiting for these opportunities. So it's about finding the right one and making sure that, it's hard. You have games and you have an off day, and you have to stand at a shoot for 4 hours. It's not easy. It's just because it looks cool in a commercial, it's not easy, and it's really hard. And they work endlessly, and they don't have off seasons, and you're traveling, you're speaking, it's a full-time job that you're adding to already a full-time job on top of being a student.
That's what I was going to say, is the grades are so important. Like, I never want to lose sight of the fact that we all know the majority of these kids aren't going to make it to a professional team. So we constantly are just reiterating, study, study, study. It's about the grades too.
In terms of the upside, so we talked about, Fara was saying sort of the safe places to play would be memorabilia, maybe dipping your toes in the water with a brand that's authentic. Walk us through the biggest possibilities. So if you make it through, you become a professional athlete, your brand gets big, what are the things you could aspire to in building a business?
I don't have any of my NIL kids that have gone on to the pros yet, but what we are gearing them up for is memorabilia and merchandise. So those would be the two, I think, just core brands. And it's a little different right now, at least with the Sanders boys, in the sense that they're working a lot on the brands that their dads got. Coach Prime, sorry, just assuming. But just those kind of businesses that we're trying to build legacy and generational, that they're attached. So like the Blender sunglasses. Yes, we started with Coach Prime, But now we're going to start focusing on how do we build these businesses out for Shiloh and Shador.
How are you thinking about media training young women athletes to prepare for this stuff? Is there a special type of training that you're giving them, trying to protect and project their image as women, that you would give differently for men?
I haven't, for me, and it might be different for you, it's the same advice, which is protect the asset, which is themselves. They're the brand. So it's always just being vulnerable so you can have that connection to your fans, but also not giving, I think, too much in a sense where you're just being too disconnected. It's a tough balance. I mean, at the end of the day, these are kids.
I think that most student athletes are trained to do reactionary media after a game. You win, you lose, you have your answers, and they're so programmed to make sure they don't mess up in those answers that when you do the media training, it's really about the pro-actionary media and sitting down and, what story do you want to tell? I tell clients that if you sat down in an interview and you don't know what the headline is when you left that interview, you need training. Because you should be able to have that and know what clicked in their head that they want to write about or what you led that to be written about. And the best at it, I mean, someone like obviously LeBron, like he could probably write the exact interview and know exactly what the headline will be. And that's what you have to strive for. And he's in year 21 doing that. So NIL to year 2, year 5, year 6, like you have to always be improving that craft if you want to be on that building brand, building business side of an athlete, which not everyone has to be.
And it's also not just when you're with the media, but in meetings, right? Because it's almost really good training because the cameras aren't there, but how they're going to interact with a potential business partner and things of that nature.
And that's on you guys as the agents to teach them those skills, or how do you advise that they get, trained in how to act in a big meeting or a big conference like this?
We're very hands-on as Fara is, so it's a combination that we work closely with the information director at the school, but also like we get super hands-on.
We've been talking a lot about the early stages of these careers, NIL, college athletes. Let's go to the end. How do you prepare an athlete who is retiring, Constance, to start their business journey now that they're no longer on the field? Is it a different strategy?
I was going to say LeBron's never retiring, so Farah's just been working on this his whole career. Strahan had pretty much just retired, so for him it was trial and error, because at one point he thought he wanted to be an actor, and then he had a sitcom on Fox, and then when that was canceled and he started going down that process, he was like, I don't want to be doing these cold calls. So like everyone's different. Tony Gonzalez had come to us while he was still playing, and it was similar. Like, I know I want a broadcasting career, so we were getting him, reps or meetings with that. I know all the leagues do these now, these broadcast boot camps. For any of you that have clients, like you should definitely have them participate in those because it's great networking, it's great reps and great experience. And what an athlete thinks they might want to do while they're playing isn't necessarily what will end up. So for us, we focus on what at the time is their passion and their strengths, but as they get closer and closer to the retirement, we're also just pivoting. I mean, look, I'm the first to say, I in a million years never thought Michael Strahan would be sitting next to Robin Roberts and George Stephanopoulos.
Incredible.
With the gap in his tooth and the lisp and all the things, and he's just won a Peabody Award. So you have to pivot.
He's actually one of the most special broadcasters that there is. We've been talking about this. Farah, one of the things Constance mentioned was meetings, the opportunity to come and network with peers, meet with brands, meet with people in production companies. It feels like there's an opportunity to build without a dollar exchange. I know you said, right, like get the biggest amount of money possible. But what would you advise for athletes that they're not quite there yet in getting endorsement deals? Are there things that they can reap benefits from in building the brand and building the story they're not getting paid for, but you think will still pay off?
I think that not just the brand building story, but I just had this happen a couple weeks ago. A client of mine who's in year 5 of the NBA, having a great career, not anyone a superstar, but just a great career. He'll probably play a few more years. Called me and he was like, who should I meet with? I just got traded. I really want to start networking and understanding what I should be thinking about when I retire and what I should do. And I'm like, this is amazing. I was like, here's a few names. Let's have breakfast. Then he called me right before the breakfast, like, what should I say to him? What should I ask him? I was like, the easiest thing is just let him talk about himself, and you just ask him questions, and you learn from that. And I think what we all do as executives, go to conferences and have meetings, we don't think to do that with athletes and just allowing them to be in the room. And all the leagues offer internships, but I'm like, not only shadow, go see. Every day a client calls me like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm at my office, I'm working. What does that mean? What do you do? I'm like, come sit next to me and see. I literally stare at a computer for 12 hours answering emails. But learn, see what it is. I joke that the women athletes actually answer emails, male athletes don't. That's my biggest differentiator right now. But just learn the style of business so that when you're in a room, that maybe you're not talking about a partnership. Maybe one day you'll work at the company. Maybe there's all these opportunities that we're not looking about because we're always thinking about endorsements, my brand, and all these things. But there's every draft, we celebrate all the athletes coming in, but that means all those athletes are leaving the league too. And we talk about retiring athletes. 80% of the athletes aren't choosing when they retire. They just wake up and they're not on a team, and then they're off that season, maybe getting on a team. So the planning isn't planning retirement or planning the business relationships. It's starting to really think of yourself as an executive.
And when do you start to have that process? Is that, midway through your career, all the way at the beginning? Should we be advising young female athletes in college to start thinking about that?
I really do think that. I think that the women have that poise and that place to be in those rooms, and I really tell our clients that get into those rooms, because you don't know what cap tables you can be on or what boards you can be on, but you're going to stand out because there's less of them right now, which obviously we're working on. But the idea that people want to talk to you, and it's way easier to start that conversation when your jersey's on and it's talking to this WNBA player than talking to the person 5 years removed from the WNBA. So take that power that you have now and bring it to every boardroom, every meeting, every dinner. I say that all these athletes are in all these cities. They spend the night. I'm like, find out in each one of those cities who's the CMO we can call. That's what the beauty of their careers should be about. But we focus so much on the branding and endorsements. But I think that the opportunity is also in the boardroom also.
That's huge, right? Taking the initiative, find the CMO in your area that you can call. I'm sure all the CMOs in the audience absolutely love to hear that. Constance, this is something I asked Kia from the New York Liberty earlier today, which is, how do you deal with talent who are building big businesses and brands that actually might feel bigger than the teams themselves? How do you handle that? Is that a problem?
It's all about communication. I'll use our Colorado experience right now. We work hand in hand with our AD. Never do anything that they're surprised by. We always like to over-communicate. Same thing with Coach Antonio Pierce, who just recently started working with. The Raiders didn't really know us, so it's we're not making a move without you guys. And again, that's the key to any good business deal, is over-communicating. And when you over-communicate, because whatever, we always say, you lift as you climb. So whatever shine the athlete's getting, they're going to raise that profile for the team that they're at.
And then on the other side, if you have an athlete that you're working with which is on a team that's doing really well, how do you help them ride that momentum?
The team or the athlete?
The athlete.
Sometimes Farah knows, we get involved in a lot of things that you traditionally wouldn't think so. It's the reverse almost. It's like Farah was saying, how do you meet with all the team partners? Whether it's the media outlets that aren't just there at the press conferences, but how do you develop those relationships, or the brand partners, or just anything like that? How do you just leverage each other? And that's the best, partnership for us.
We have just 1 minute left, so I have one fun question for the both of you. Which is an athlete, would love a female athlete, but any athlete that you've worked with, who you think has done an admirable and remarkable job of transitioning from athlete to business person?
Sue Bird.
It's obviously a very good answer. Sue Bird here in the front.
Mine is Aja Wilson, who I am just so obsessed with. She is so direct with her decisions, and she knows what she's doing and what she stands for, and I think you could see that in everything she does.
I love that we got some hard truths out of the agents. They know what's up. Some of the things that we talked about today, Constance saying, keep the main thing the main thing. You have to focus on your sport first and foremost. When we talked about social and building a brand, you also gave us a reality check Not everyone's going to be a brand, but if you put in the work early, you have a better shot. In the 90s and 2000s, everyone had wanted a record label. Now everyone wants a production company. And soon the next thing will come, I'm sure. Right now, the biggest bets that people can take that we think are safe and pay off, super interesting, memorabilia and merchandise. And one of the reasons that's interesting is you can control your own narrative that way, which is really smart. Fara also said, if you're going to work with a brand early on, make it endemic to what you care about. I thought the example of being lactose intolerant and partnering with a milk company was spot on. If there are any designer fashion companies that want to work with me one day, maybe they could do that. When we talked about what your career looks like upon retiring, super interesting that when you think you're going to retire is not something you can predict. And so you need to be mapping that out the full time. And what you think you want to do, you might not want to do. I had no idea Michael Strahan wanted to be an actor. I just see him as the Peabody Award-winning broadcaster. And finally, I thought it was really poignant that you said your role as agents is not to exploit name and image and likeness, but to protect it for these young athletes. And I think many should be grateful that they have people like you looking out for their backs. So Constance and Fara, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you in the audience. Don't go anywhere. We got a bunch more coming up.